Attention, all you fishes in the sea. Welcome to the Fisch Bowl with Sam Fisher.
Eric Miller on the Fisch Bowl. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to swim in the bowl with me.
As it were. Yeah. Hopefully there's no saltwater shark fish or anything in here. Yeah.
Well, on the subject of sharks and everything, one of the films you've worked on that I'm a big fan of because I love B grade, C grade films, Swamp Shark.
Yes. Yeah. I love it. I was really lucky to have got to work on that, both writing it and get to do production on it too. I won't say it was easy, and it was hotter than hell. It's when you watch the movie, it's way hotter than it actually looks. But because Louisiana for about 4 months out of the year can just be scorching and humid. But no, it was great. It was a great experience all the way around. And it's such a fun movie. I think it's the one out of all the ones people talk about that I've worked on and in various capacities. That's the one that doesn't get as much attention, but I think should, because it's just great.
Absolutely. I mean, I love the campy, creature feature type monster films. It's one of my favorite genres going back to the 80s that really like brought it back in a prominent way. And even in the 90s, you had like a significant amount of monster movies were like a big theme.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a lost art now, but and I grew up cutting teeth on them too. That was the heyday, and getting to watch those when my watching films, but also just growing up on the awesome 50s, 60s, and 70s monster movies too. And it's funny how it's almost, I want to call it a subset of horror, but it's actually its own genre. Like, it's not even a subset. The hell with it. Like, horror's horror. And yes, we've got all the different types of genre, psychological, supernatural, slasher, whatever. But I think we should just put monster movies on their own pedestal. Just walk away from it and leave it up there right in the middle.
I completely agree. And monster movies are really, I think, my favorite genre. I mean, because you can throw like Predator and Alien in there.
Yeah.
They are technically movie monsters, and I've heard many different celebrities, comedians, people basically say watching the first Predator is like a rite of passage into manhood.
So it's so iconic. It's funny. I always leave that off of my top 10 movie list, and I like, wait a minute. And when somebody brings it up, it's like, how could I leave that off? It's just so iconic. And you know what? It really drills down into one of the things that people bring up over and over. The story is great. The execution's great. The filmmaking, but it's about the characters.
Exactly.
And wow. And for a bunch of tough guys, the great diversity of the tough guys in that. Each one has their own style and movement. And obviously everybody, it must have been like testosterone hell on set. I mean, when you're trying to stand up to Arnold, are you kidding me? But every single one of them hold their own, even against Arnold and against everybody else. And I guess say Arnold and Jesse Ventura at his height. Arnold's Arnold in so many ways. So.
And I mean, I'm like a Arnold Stallone nut. My dad let me watch Total Recall when I was 5 years old. That was my first introduction to like Schwarzenegger. And out of his entire filmography, I mean, obviously there's Conan, obviously there's Terminator, but like I have to kind of say those two franchises are, in my opinion, just givens with like the popularity. If you want to like separate, the franchise star, theme to his actual, performance, concept, idea, and everything. Obviously, Terminator is big, but I would have to say it's Predator and Total Recall.
Total Recall is such an interesting movie. It's so smart, and it obviously, just such a great script and great source material. But and you probably know this, but it's one of the great what ifs in Hollywood. I think it was supposed to be Richard Dreyfuss or someone like him that was supposed to play the part, the everyman. And if you can imagine that, it would be the same movie, but totally different. Like, okay, we get that. Is Arnold a superhero or not? Of course he is. Look at the guy, but they do a very good job of selling the fact that he's just a muscular mine worker or whatever. But if you could imagine that movie with Dreyfuss himself or someone like him, the true everyman that wasn't that iconic Schwarzenegger.
Right.
I don't think the movie would be as much fun. It would be in a different category. It would be psychological science fiction. And even, maybe later day, you could put somebody make it like The Bourne Identity or something like that. But in that time and in that era, I think just that big Technicolor B Schwarzenegger all over it is just kind of awesome.
Exactly. And I just have to say, like, seeing a film like that's like that colorful, that graphic, especially violently graphic, at that age, I don't know, like if I'm just one of those special people that loves film and is impacted by film in that way, but it left such a impact on in like my mind that I needed to absorb as much, of like I was like, well, if this is age 5, like what else is out there?
What
Like,
exactly? Well,
like
and with all that, it's smart. There's actually a real story and a real script and a brain twist at the end, and that's the real beauty of it too. That it doesn't. I think that's why a lot of B movies get short shrift sometimes. That it can just be, oh, it's just a dumb monster movie. No, it's actually a wickedly smart monster movie, or whatever it is. So B movies
exactly.
they can hold their own. I mean, it may not be probably a Jacob's Ladder or something, or on the level of a Shining with psychological manipulation or anything, but it's definitely up there. It's definitely in that pantheon.
And I think it's even crazier, going like real out there, alien talk and what's kind of going on now with, what they're doing with Mars and stuff. But it would be pretty amazing if like that film prophesies,
What's
stuff they find on Mars and everything when the government decides to actually release, what they've known all
what
these years, obviously. But
it's probably, yeah, and it's interesting, one of the looks that how they've treated Mars over the years, and different from John Carter of Mars, which
mhm.
again, that's another one I always leave off my list. But Edgar Rice Burroughs is such an amazing writer, and I think a lot of people just see Tarzan and John Carter, if they even know the references, they just see kind of cartoonish B movie icons, but those are deep, dark, and weird stories. There's a lot of stuff going on in there, and Burroughs was. I'm not a scholar on him by any chance, but wow, just the depths and the angles and the twist. But the way he did, Mars, because obviously simplistic look before we could really get a good look with great satellites. Oh, there's canals on Mars and all that kind of stuff, which was in all kinds of
Exactly.
literature, and Orson Welles and everyone, and War of the Worlds and all that. But I love the different takes on Mars when we get there, and maybe that would be the cool one, to be like Total Recall, to be that way.
Right, right. I mean, hopefully not with, the government of Mars withholding air prices and everything. Well,
Yep.
which is where
Well,
we might
and
be heading, but
yeah,
but
yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah. It's yeah. Are we getting there now? That's same, and that was echoed in The Expanse, of course. One of the many
Right.
subplots in The Expanse, and all those terrific books and the show. So it's like anytime that control over a precious commodity, and when your commodity happens to be air, that kind of puts a whole new twist on everything.
Exactly. And it came from one of the short stories by the brilliant late I wouldn't just call him an author. I would call him, dare I say, prophet, philosopher, Philip K. Dick, because Blade Runner, Screamer's another really underrated
Love
90s,
Screamer. Yeah,
sci-fi horror-esque flick. One of my favorites with Peter Weller, and also taking place unknowingly in something that was like that's big now, with having everything being like connected with Marvel and DC, and even like the MonsterVerse stuff that they're trying to do now. In my opinion, not the best way, because I I want to see like monster movies, not everything with like having to have like a social commentary, like subtext or something. I want to see, just like, leave all that stuff out and just make a movie that doesn't have to have anything tied to it.
yeah,
Just
pontificate or
just
whatever.
right,
And
right,
I tend to gloss over those things if I can. I mean, I may not agree with everything on every statement, but also if a movie's just fun, it's fun. I mean,
right, right.
you can look at Avatar, the Avatar series, as being some of the greatest pro environment movies ever, and anti-military, I guess, in a way, but anti-government control, like we're talking about. But at the same
Mhm.
time, they're just big, rollicking, amazing, big science fiction, and on the
Exactly.
best way. So, and again, if you get the message out of it, good for you. If you don't, whatever, just watch the movie. So that's how I kind of take it.
Right. I agree
Yeah, it's
completely.
Philip K. Dick, philosopher, absolutely philosopher. Interesting time that with him and guys like Bradbury and Matheson and just like, clutches of people that created like so much stuff. And there's been groups like that throughout history, of course, in the writing world and the screenwriting and filmmaking world. But it seems like that was a really prolific. I mean, look Matheson's the same way. Like, is there anything that he wrote that didn't turn into a terrific project or film?
Right.
And Dick's a little, like you said, a little bit more, I guess you'd say, intellectual maybe, and more existential in so many ways, but like, wow, mind bending.
And his writing style is like it's very like it throws you right into whatever world he's writing about. And the crazy thing, like I've heard a lot of conspiracy theory stuff about him where they I mean they know about like this like it's some type of like it's not exactly a meteor or an asteroid or anything, but it's like some type of dark rock or something that's stationed in a stationary position outside in the space. And the CIA, people have known about this, but there's like theories that it's like basically, a like transmitting to whatever, bigger, intergalactic, whatever, alien race or whatever is like watching us in real time.
Right. Or like
And
a sentinel or a monolith, like
exactly,
2001 or something in space.
exactly, something like that. And it's said supposedly these like people in expert like alien stuff have said that certain people have been like it's transmitted like because if you like read Philip K. Dick's like his short stories and even his like full-length stories, it's very like it would make sense if it's like being something is being like beamed and he's like just typing away. And I've heard stories about how like he was very into psychedelics with like acid and stuff, and he would
Right.
go on acid trips and just go on a writing binge. And the same thing with what is it, Frank Herbert, who wrote the Dune series, which also could be something very futuristic or very ancient, whatever
Yeah.
side you want to
Would have
look
come
at
in.
it.
Well, it's interesting you say. I haven't heard of that one, and I haven't even thought of that. But I know there's that's a common trope in writing is what like where do you get your ideas from? But the question of where does how does it come into you? And people have said everything from asking the question: are we piercing the veil of another dimension psychically somehow, and we're just simply replicating things that's on the other side and telling the story? Is it a signal coming in? I think it was Robert E. Howard said at one point that he either literally or figuratively, I think more figuratively, felt like Conan was standing behind him, telling him the stories, maybe not telling him exactly what to write. And I think that's, like you say, and who knows what the doors of perception, Aldous Huxley, that's one of the big questions is, are we opening a door? Is that all in our mind? Are we going someplace else? Same thing with dreams. Are dreams are they literally internal? Or are they transporting us to another place? Nobody really knows the answer, and we may never know the answer. But it's fascinating to say that. And like, where does creativity come from? And that happened to me one time when I was writing a screenplay. That I usually meticulously get an idea and I think about it for years and years, and then I'll write a treatment and I'll slowly develop it, and kind of takes forever. And eventually, I kind of go, oh, and I'll sit down and start writing. But it's a very detailed process that I do. And this particular screenplay, I was out hiking and I'd had the very, very basic core of the idea a few years before, but nothing more than that, just the basic setup. And from one step to the next, the idea, the first 5-6 pages went pop in my head. And I literally remember stopping the next step and going, oh, wow. And I could literally see the first 5 pages. And I did some voice to text on the phone. By the time the signal got back, I got home. I sat down that night and wrote that. And almost for every day for probably, for 26, 27 days, I wrote 5 or 6 pages. And that end result is about, 95, 98% of what the original thing was. that just came into me. Never happened to me before, never happened again. I mean, I wonder, is that how Stephen King does it? He gets up every day and sits there and writes. I think for most writers that I know, it's a more laborious work process because writing isn't easy. But that one was actually fun because it was kind of like I'm watching the next chapter. I didn't know what the next chapter was going to be, and I'm like, oh, I'm conduiting something. And obviously, I think it was my subconscious working that I'd been cooking on the story for a while, and a lot of different references and homages and things that came in. But it's like, still, it was just like, that was fun. That was a ride. And again, who knows what the answer to that is? Are we ever going to find out? I don't know. Maybe The Rock's beaming something. I wish it would beam me the next number one bestseller.
Exactly.
New York Times, please. Hello. I got my antenna up. I'm wide open. My chips are active. Please program me.
What script did that end up being?
It's called Haunted Object Transportation. It hasn't been made. Nobody's picked it up. So, and I don't know if it will. It'll wind up being a $100 million movie. And it's essentially, if you know William Friedkin's Sorcerer, which was based on the French of Fear book and movie. In mine, I basically put a real active character haunted house on the back of a truck being transported through the American Southwest through prop machinations instead of a bunch of dynamite, which is the plot setup in Sorcerer. So, but the idea was, as I'm sitting here thinking, what can be the most dangerous thing that I could think of to transport on the back of a truck? And in that movie, dynamite is, the old sweaty dynamite across war-torn South America to put out a oil fire is very real. They hit a bump and the whole thing blows up. And in my world, I just went with an anthropomorphized haunted house that's real, laughs like Vincent Price, has teeth, has fangs, can drive you insane and kill you. And suddenly it's on the back of the truck and it's a road. I basically make the haunted house movie a road trip.
Awesome. So that sounds very cool. I love it.
It's a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite things that I've ever written. Yeah, I really would too. I think it's fun, and I basically, to me personally, I think I've reinvented the genre. But I hope somebody out there's listening, and somebody will pick it up and make it, even though it would cost a decent amount of money. It's fun, and it's got great characters, and it's kind of magical realism. It's got a grown-up Harry Potter character, kind of in a way, that's a real sorcerer and this crazy, powerful government person who basically covers up everything supernatural, except this one's too big to cover up. So it's on the front page of every paper everywhere. And the military's involved, police, firemen, a trucking company, and these guys that drive their little van, haunted object transportation, that moves haunted vases and mirrors and things. And they suddenly have to transport the largest, meanest haunted house that's ever existed. So it's a lot of fun.
I mean, you could potentially set up like a whole John Wick style, extended universe based off of that, like a Ghostbusters type thing, based on that concept. So
yeah.
I think that's very cool, and definitely one of the more original ideas I've heard in a long time that I would love to.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And it's an homage to other things. I mean, obviously, I didn't replicate or take anything from Wages of Fear or from Sorcerer, but it's still definitely an homage to that in that same world, and a lot of other references in there. There's things from, like I do with everybody does, and I do it in my writing as little bits and pieces of things that would be cool to do my version of that and replicate it. So, I mean, it's Smokey and the Bandit with a haunted house.
Right. I mean, I had a similar thing. I went to school for screenwriting. I've been focused a little more on the podcast as like a more viable, realistic approach to stuff. But I have it's a little passion project, and I've talked about it on the show before, and with actually someone you've worked with or worked on a film that he co-wrote, Puppet Master 3 with C. Courtney Joyner.
Yes, good friend, and a absolute encyclopedia of Hollywood and film and horror. If you obviously know him, and if he hasn't been a guest on, you should have him a guest, because
I had him on the show a while ago. It's like over an hour interview, but I talked about with him a concept idea I had. Because he worked on, some Lovecraft stuff. I've also had Charles Band on the show. Well, I interviewed him live at a Pittsburgh Horror Realm convention that we just had a couple weekends back. And another person that he worked with, Andrew Divoff, I finally had a chance to interview, talk about Wishmaster and everything. But I am a big, again, the B-grade movies, Lovecraft. I am a huge Lovecraft aficionado when it comes to the film stuff. And obviously Stuart Gordon, Brian Usna,
Yeah, all those
that
guys.
whole team, were major influences on the style of writing, along with Stephen King, George Romero, like, Craven, the Godfathers, basically, of like the 70s, 80s, 90s. And one of my favorite films, because I'm a huge sucker for anthology horror, anthology in general. Like my mindset when I see an anthology movie, and especially growing up in the '90s, where you had the X-Files and the resurgence of like the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits, and watching reruns of Tales from the Dark Side, Tales from the Dark Side movie, Tales from the Crypt. I always thought of anthology movies being like you pay for one movie, but you get like multiple, like a little more for your buck, essentially.
Right. Yeah, you get three or
And
four, however many
right,
stories on
right,
the same
right,
thing. Yeah,
right. Creep Show is
creep
probably
shows.
my
Yeah,
favorite George Romero movie of all time. And there's this really underrated. I mean, it's like hasn't even made it to DVD unless you get a bootleg, and it hasn't made it to Blu-ray yet with like a director's cut. Why? Scream Factory, are you listening? Arrow Video, are you listening? And that is Necronomicon Book of the Dead, and
which I don't know about. Well, I know the
uh,
Leprechaun. I don't know the anthology. So,
it's from Brian Usna,
oh,
um,
okay.
and Jeffrey Combs. In one of the many infamous Lovecraft films that he worked on with, the Usna Gordon team, he actually plays H.P. Lovecraft.
I can't believe I've never seen this. Actually, it's
Yeah,
I have these weird blank spots.
it takes place in the like I think late 20s or early 30s, and he goes to this like mystic library, and there's like this cult people, monks or something that have a Necronomicon, and he knows about it. He sneaks and basically gets in this secret chamber and starts like deciphering the book. And the movie is like three stories of him, deciphering from the book. And then there's like a beginning, middle, and wraparound with Jeffrey Combs as Lovecraft. And the way it leaves off, spoiler alert, is that like he gets away with the book. And it was like, I think from New Line Cinema at the time, like early 90s.
I can't.
And
Yeah, somehow it's one of those like, how did I miss that? What? And I
yeah,
never had the pleasure of working with Brian, but Stewart and everybody else. It's like, oh yeah, yeah, had the luck to work with all of them.
I just like I've had this long idea. It's like a dream project to kind of make a sequel and almost like a trilogy of anthology, sequels follow up to the original film. And it would follow like I have the script like fully written. It's won like a bunch of awards and some film festival stuff. But like it would follow, Lovecraft, several years after, the after events of the first film. So like now he's, getting closer, and it would have three brand new stories. I wrote all the stories with various inspirations from numerous different movies and stuff, and a lot of Gordon, Usna, Stephen King stuff, Carpenter, and it would just include three brand new stories and, kind
And
of kick it
yeah,
off.
that'd be awesome. It's interesting to me. There's always new things to be found in the Lovecraft mythos. It's amazing, and there seems like every year there's a new book anthology out, or two, or three, or four, and some elements of that have just of him his work have just permeated everything in the culture so very much. It's just amazing how it's perennial. And I guess that's what happens when you create a pantheon like that, and it's such a rich. I'm always in awe of writers who can do that, who create worlds and then people the worlds with, in his case, not only just people, but the
Right,
atmosphere and the elder gods and the whole mythos of that. That's not easy to
right.
do. That's not
Not
easy
just
to
that,
do.
but like some of the stories are so like open-ended that with the right writer's mind, like they could take something very short, open-ended, everything, a lot of it's implied, and then basically write something around it and fill in the gaps to make like, their interpretation of,
What
the
that is.
original
Well,
source material.
Well,
Yeah.
that's kind of a writing style too that he did it. I mean, I'm more of a Poe guy because I like the story and the character is much more story and character oriented. But the atmosphere that comes through and the open endedness and it really engages your mind. And there's some writers that overwriting is not an insult, but they use a lot of words. Fantasy does that, use a lot of words, and they paint pictures,
Right.
and that's glorious and amazing. And I love. There's many of my favorite writers do that, but there's others that underwrite either by style or just on purpose, and it engages your brain. I think one of my favorites, Roger Zelazny, who doesn't get quite the street cred that his contemporaries get because there hasn't been a lot of his projects made into films and TV, but still mad genius. And his multi-genre mixing things together in speculative fiction and dark fiction, kind of grim dark in a way, but also science fiction-y and magic. And it's really kind of hard to pin down some of Zelazny's stuff. But whereas another writer one of my favorite books of all time is Road Marks. And it's basically a road throughout space and time that if you have the infinity to it, you can find the on-ramp and you can travel up and down it and take off ramps and go to different places and times. And there's a whole story involved with it about a character trying to recreate events that he remembers happening on the road. So there's a great plot and great characters. But any other writer, that would have been, 1,000-page or 3 books or something, and well done. I think it's maybe 200, 250 something, Zelazny, but I believe I read something with him some point where he said he underwrote on purpose because he wanted to engage the reader's brains. So kind of meet that halfway, make it just descriptive and colorful enough, but let you put your input in. I think Lovecraft's definitely in that, although, I mean, his style is so eloquent and unique, and he definitely paints that atmospheric picture, but still leaves it open for us to let your brain go to the dark places.
Exactly, exactly. And I just, when I was writing it, I had my various like movie inspiration, films on in the background for each of the stories. It was like I kind of like felt, just like I saw everything kind of like in my head, like how, like you said, and I was able to just like really pump everything out like very quickly, you know. So, I mean, it hasn't really happened with other stuff, but that one in particular was I'm hoping someday I pitched it to Charles Band when he was in Pittsburgh a few years ago, and he seemed like intrigued. I didn't know how to like get in touch with him or follow up about it, but I'm trying to like get that into the right hands. Maybe there's
Go
potential.
somewhere. And well,
Yeah.
we're in the world now. We're in the filmmaking world, obviously, with you can do it with your camera. I mean, you still have to
Right,
have the
right,
right effects and things, but I'm amazed and blown away. I watch a lot of YouTube videos. I like the whole back rooms genre, and there's others that people Mike Flanagan started off with. I think the budget was in the tens of thousands of dollars on Absentia.
right.
And also, the route too. You make the little short film teaser for it, and whether it's not just going to a festival anymore or enter it into a contest, it can actually have its own life on YouTube as its own entity, and maybe people pick it up and like it. I mean, back rooms is. I mean, there's so much with the back rooms, but it's turned into a massive movie that's happening right now, which is completely
Well,
awesome.
not just that, but like the guy who did the Terrifier movies, like he
Yep.
self-funded it, and like you have like the GoFundMe's now, and I forget the other ones, but those types of you know fundraising campaign stuff where
Yeah, and it's that whole thing that we do, and I'm guilty of it myself. But it's the advice that I give to everyone: is just do it, get out and do it. And you got to have the right idea that you can do for a smaller amount of money. But these days with effects, I'm not an AI fan because nothing against the AI itself. I'm against everything about it and how it's taking jobs and replacing people. And I
Mhm.
think even with a special effect, CGI or whatever, there is a person creating the art behind that. And
Right.
even if it may not have the same on-screen weight as a person in makeup, there's still a person connected to that. So I'm not advocating do it AI, but there's so many inexpensive ways and apps and things you can use to make your effects. And there's so many filmmakers out there that probably in your neighborhood. That's the advice I give to everybody. And I mean, look at films even recently where, again, I'm guilty of not getting off my ass and doing it, but like everything from Shinichiro Ueda making One Cut of the Dead for almost no money whatsoever. And that's just an instant iconic classic movie that's recent. And so you don't necessarily have to have a whole lot of money to do it, but it does take time. It does take energy, and I think that's part of it too. All of our heroes, like you said, Romero, he just did it. Don Coscarelli. I mean, it helps to have that youthful energy. I think I want to say he was 19 or 20 or something. Maybe he was older when he made Phantasm. I could be wrong on that. But even flashing back to Sam Raimi and the guys in Michigan, again, it helps to be young and on fire, but that fire is burning in you. Just go do it. That's kind of advice to you, me, and to everybody out there listening is just do it. It's like a Henry Rollins song or a Nike commercial, and especially now when there's an outlet. I mean, for good or ill, the YouTubes, the whatever, the channels, the good and bad on everything. But before, if you had to get into a festival, now the festival is everywhere. The festival is on my TV and it's every day. It's funny. Right. I was thinking earlier when you're talking about anthologies, YouTube is the biggest anthology in the world. It's a nonstop anthology. It may not be packaged as such where you go sit in the theater and see 3 or 4 or 5 stories on a theme, but you can create your own theme. And side note, I'm not connected to Google or YouTube, anything whatsoever. And I actually pay for it just to skip the ads, which I hate. But it is like anything. If you use the tool, it's out there, and it's such a great ability to get people seen and noticed and get ideas. And again, like Backrooms and others, kaboom.
Exactly. Wow. And another film of yours I wanted to talk about real quick is on talking about doing something with a smaller budget with a big idea and executing it really brilliantly, and also being another cult sci-fi classic. That's Circuitry Man 2. I had the chance to a while back. I had Vernon Wells, the Circuitry Man himself, on the show.
Amazing guy. Amazing.
I couldn't keep my cool, and I quoted the Schwarzenegger line after he kills him in Commando, but he took it all right,
like such a well, hey, you know what, as long as you're not a Psycho fans are great. That's why people do things, and it's
right.
It's like me, people still saying that they like films that I wrote, and I'm like, well, that's kind of awesome that somebody actually liked it. And I actually like the people who hate them too, because I laugh at the terrible reviews, because I'm like, hey, they got that. I can't remember if it's, and just to be clear, I didn't write or direct or anything on Circuitry Man 2, but I worked on it. But I can't remember, is it 2 or 1? I want to say it's 2 because I remember being there, but my memory's sketchy, where a squib got Circuitry Man, he's, I forget his character name now, but he got shot. The squib goes off and the squib caught on fire and his costume is on fire. He finished the scene.
I can't remember.
I can't remember if it's 2 or 1. I want to say it was 2 because I kind of remember being there, but that could just be me recreating a memory and putting myself somewhere I wasn't. But he acted through it, and you're just like, oh my god! And you could tell when you watch it close, he knows it's happening. He can feel the heat from it. And it's just an accident that happens in filming. But how many people would just go cut? It's kind of like it's like the political version of Teddy Roosevelt getting shot in the chest during a speech years ago, and then and then getting taped up and then going for the another 3 hours of the speech. Like, wow, like what? Obviously it didn't hit an artery or anything, but I think there was I was hearing I'm totally forgetting his name, but he blew me away, the new guitarist for Judas Priest, who basically grew up wanting to be in Judas Priest and became the lead guitarist for Judas Priest, and I guess it's been 5-8 years ago, had an aortic aneurysm on stage and was in absolute pain in a festival, I think it was in Kentucky, and just in agony, and finished the set and went to the hospital evac and has like a 14-hour surgery to replace it. I'm like, that's heavy metal. That's like, those are just some badass people. So Vernon acted through that. I
just heard a story about Harrison Ford doing the same thing on The Fugitive. Like, he apparently injured his leg, and since his character was like supposed to walk with a limp, like Like if you go back and watch The Fugitive now, and you see him like running and everything, and why it
He's
looks
really limping.
he's really
Wow.
limping, and then like waited to have the surgery until the movie was over. You know,
Wow. And well, yeah, I know if you're a Jackie Chan fan, I'm sure you
yeah,
are,
yeah,
and that
yeah.
was always the best thing of watching the outtakes. But I want to say City Hunter or Super Cop 2, one of those where you show in the thing where he basically broke his ankle into early in the filming, and they basically put a cast on it and painted it to look like a shoe. And when you watch the movie now, he's doing all those insane stunts, like three-quarters of them with
Right,
a
right.
broken ankle in a cast. And you're like, it's mental. So, yeah, hats off to Vernon and all them for doing that and just creating iconic characters, too. It's funny how the Circuitry Man movies are kind of don't get as much. I think they're cult, they might be cult classics for all I know,
Yeah,
but they
yeah.
definitely should be if they aren't.
I mean, I honestly had to get both of them bootleg on DVD. I think they're. I'm not even sure if they're accessible on DVD. If they are, it's one of those DVDs that's definitely out of print
Yeah.
and incredibly hard to find.
Yeah,
Um,
there's that's kind of the sad thing about streaming. I mean, it used to be, yes, there's a lot of DVDs out there somewhere, but you're buying them used from Amazon or whatever, and streaming doesn't have everything. And that also goes back. I forget the exact number, but I think with nitrate film and film catching on fire, I heard this decades ago that there's something like 80 or 90% of everything ever shot is gone, doesn't
yeah,
exist. And that's going
yeah,
back hundreds of years into the film era. And then even I think what they found out when digital came in and they're starting to digital archive things, they found out that as people don't realize this, or you start to find out, even CDs don't last. They're not permanent. And I think a lot of films were lost or damaged, had to be repaired. And the way I understand it now, even in the big, there's still a lot of film archives at the studios. There was a famous fire 10 or 15 years ago at Universal down in the labs where it destroyed a lot of stuff. But luckily they had multiple copies. And I think there's the salt mine storage places in Kansas City also have gigantic vaults filled full of film prints, but they migrate them digitally every year or two or whatever it is. I'm not a technical guy, but way I understand it is they migrate the files to make sure that they're fresh and clean now. So thank goodness there's people restoring out there. But like you say, something that recent, something that I worked on to think, wait, I can't even get that. I can't watch it. Where is that? And it's like bizarre to even think that. But and then when you discover things like I have to go through my own IMDb to remember things that I worked on sometimes. I think I found a T-shirt from I forget what it was. Maybe it was Dario Argento's Trauma or something. And I was like, oh wait, did I work? I totally forgot that I had worked on that. I only did a few days on it. It wasn't a lot, but everything becomes a blur. But that's the small version of, hey, we've lost entire films, and hopefully they're not lost. They're in they're somewhere in the archives, and Amazon's got
right.
an amazingly deep bench on things, and eventually maybe you'll be able to, somebody's going to make a buck and put it out there for $3, and the redistributors too, like you mentioned, all the great releasing companies that are putting the B movies out. That's awesome. It's everybody's trying to make money.
That's one thing what
It's great.
I love about Blu-ray. Like Blu-ray. I mean, I'm one of those people that I invest in collecting physical media, not just if it's like an apocalyptic scenario where it's like streaming services. It's all you lose your internet, you lose accessibility to watch all that stuff. Having
And you
physical
don't and you
copies.
don't actually own it, even though you've
Right,
bought it. You don't
exactly.
actually
That
own it.
that
Like
too, that
what?
too. And some of the stuff that Scream Factory, Arrow, I forget some of the other ones, but like stuff that they're restoring, stuff from the 80s, 90s, and even making like director's cuts or unrated versions of restoring, footage that was, missing, that a lot of movies, if you would have had all this extra stuff in there, it would have made it, one, make a lot more sense, and two, be much more conceptual and I think more interesting and long lasting. And I think it's great that there's people that are like, I guess, my age and, a little older that, either grew up in the time frame that these things are being released or, were old enough to rent it and watch it on cable and everything, before the times of streaming services. And also, just like you said, more importantly, streaming does not have everything.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I want to really watch this, and I'll look, and like none of the streaming services have it.
Yeah, I was telling somebody about another favorite film on the category of how the F did that get made? Rubber. If you've seen
Yeah,
Rubber or
yeah,
not,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
couldn't find Rubber anywhere. And obviously I didn't go on Amazon and buy a DVD. I'm sure it's there. And honestly, I might have a DVD in a box somewhere. I could dig it out of the closet. But yeah, it's not on streaming. But other things there's a lot of stuff popping up on YouTube again, and things I'm surprised things show up. Tubi is amazing. Tubi's incredible. There's like things on there I hadn't even thought of. Like, wow, where did they find that? And there's so many of these. I don't know how any of them make money. They're all popping up right and left, from Pluto to Tubi to all these that have all this content. And some are connected to studios or whatever. Like I cut the cable DirecTV cord years ago, but I have an antenna. I'm lucky enough that I have a little wired thing that I point right at the mountains, Mount Wilson and above Los Angeles, where all the TV towers are. So I get like 800 channels, and I'm flipping through some of these, and like there's so much insane content. I mean, so many things like 50 different Japanese channels and Spanish channels and all this, but some of the movie channels on there is like, wow, who's well, the biggest ones obviously MeTV, and then I think I have, the science fiction one on. I can't believe it. It's on right now in the other room. But shows the X-Files every night and things.
Right. Was it Comet or something?
Yeah, Comet. Yeah, those are obviously the big ones.
Yeah.
But so there's a lot of content on those, and it's great when things show up. So, but it is sad that some things are lost, and I wonder how many things are actually lost. Same thing with books. There's manuscripts of books, and I haunt used bookstores, and not everything has made it to ebooks. And I think there's probably Project Gutenberg was out there for a while, which might have. Not sure if that was directly gone sideways with AI harvesting of things, if that was connected to Gutenberg or not. But at least there was a benign intent in the beginning to basically make a repository of every book ever published. And at the heart of it, that's an amazing idea. That's a terrific idea. I'm sure somewhere along the way, somebody gets access to that and does it for nefarious purposes or to make a buck, whatever. That's a whole different story. But it's like great to have that, and so many little entities doing that for film too.
Exactly. And some of the like collector edition Blu-ray sets they put together, I mean, just like when DVD was big and they would do that stuff. I mean, Blu-ray though, I think it's going to be there a little bit longer, and just because it's new, but because it's a crisper look. There's cleaner images. There's a lot of stuff that didn't make it to DVD, that was only on VHS, didn't make it to DVD, and these organizations are going out of their way to take, the stuff that was kind of solely on VHS and convert it to Blu-ray, which is like going one step past DVD, which
Right.
is almost like
And
a
hopefully,
dime.
hopefully you're going back to the original, finding the original
Right,
prints and making the
right,
really, really good, taking care. The other thing I brought up too, and it may be everywhere and I may be an idiot, but the DVDs, the special editions, the Blu-rays have the repository of the extra editions and the director's cuts and the interviews. And like you said, Full Moon, Charlie Band did the Video Zone back in the day, and almost everyone you watch, like I watched the director's cut and a commentary on David Fincher's Alien 3, I think it was, made, like you said earlier, about films that get cut. And for reasons, there's always a reason: running time, exhibitor time, some executive doesn't get it, or some director just went too far, or to whatever the reason is. But that movie made way more sense, and I really enjoyed it 100 times more with the deleted scenes. And it didn't turn it into a bloated 4-hour movie or anything. It made the movie make sense. And I think there's some things in some things in the screenplay of Prometheus that didn't make it to it, which makes everything make more sense. And again, reasons. There's always reasons for something. They're not always nefarious, but sometimes things get cut out of a movie that shouldn't be cut out of a movie, that ruins the enjoyment of it or the explanation of it.
Nightbreed, perfect example. What is it? It's the Cabal cut that came out a couple years ago, where they cut like 45 minutes, maybe a little longer from the movie. And I mean, I always like Nightbreed. but like the theatrical cut makes it look like a very just, bam, bam, bam. A lot of stuff is smashed together, and it is more like an action monster movie. The director's cut gives all the lore and mythology and backstories on all the characters that, when remember seeing the theatrical cut that was pretty much out for the longest period of time until the director's cut came out, that it was like, it was this movie and that's what you thought it was. And then the director's cut totally just makes it like a really much more interesting movie. Same thing for all the Riddick movies with Vin Diesel.
I love the Riddick movies. I love that franchise. And Pitch Black, it's an interesting thing. It's almost like Alien and Aliens, where Pitch Black is a horror movie,
Right.
even though it's science fiction. It's a horror
Exactly.
movie.
I always thought that.
Action elements. And then you get into, and then you do the second one. It's like, this is a big, grimdark, almost Warhammer. It's got so many Warhammer 40K overtones to it, grimdark overtones. This is big, dark science fiction. And like,
Right.
wow. And then I love that the third one goes back to the basics again,
Right.
and expands it and does it better. It's like such an interesting franchise. There's so much going on in there.
And for the longest time, I didn't even know there were director's cuts for each film. And HBO it happened to be on, and I had it on, and, as like background, and I am listening, and I'm like starting to hear scenes and stuff that I'm like, I do not remember at all being, in the theatrical cut. And then like my attention is like immediately drawn to like, is there a director's cut for this? And then like I find out there is, I get like the whole, Blu-ray box set, with like the most current, third one in there, and has all the director's cuts for, each of the three, live action versions. And Chronicles of Riddick, I mean, would have been a much, much more interesting and understandable concept, to go with if they just would have kept in, all the stuff that they cut, because everything that they cut makes that movie just seem like it's you know, uh, your typical, kind of 2000s sci-fi adventure action movie where there's so much backstory on Riddick, the setup for this new one they're doing where he actually goes to Furia, and him being a Furian, where is Furia the origin story, and just there's so much, and the necromongers. There's so much in there too, and in the Riddick director's cut, there's so much more of like the survival stuff and the necromongers. That like Riddick, the third one, probably my favorite since Pitch Black.
It's Pitch Black, yeah.
Because it goes back to that like roots, but it also has that like updated, storyline. And Batista in that movie, and Jordy, what's his name? Moala. I forget how to pronounce.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah, I'm forgetting.
Yeah, he's a great. Since Bad Boys 2, he is one of the best villains. Actors.
Again, back to the Predator testosterone in the room. I mean, how you get Batista and Diesel in the same room? It's just
right.
Like wow, this is just rolling off. So,
and even how he kills Batista, and with the line like "Jamoke."
such a great iconic character. And that's, I was going to say earlier, we're talking about it too, about all of the director's cuts. The limited series. I mean, I hate it when a series gets cut off when it's supposed to go on for seasons. They leave you on a cliffhanger, and whoever cancels it, that just sucks before it can wrap up. Everything from Firefly to,
right.
So many examples of that. But if you plan a limited series, you can actually take a breather. You can explore all of those things. It's much like the difference between a novel and a screenplay, where in a novel you can go in different directions, develop side characters, develop side plots. Game of Thrones, best example. I mean, mean, there's so many, they ended up putting in things that weren't even in the books, but you can explore the world more and in a limited series. Whereas in a film, you're limited. I mean, if you're lucky and established, you have 120 pages. If you're David Fincher,
Right.
James Cameron, you can put out a 3-hour movie. Everybody else, the exhibitors, there's so many people in the chain of command of a movie going, wait, we can only get 4 screenings a day instead of 5 or 6 with a shorter film. There's so many things pushing the end of the length of a film that from the very beginning, from the writing stage, the screenplay, the shooting, and then finally in the edit, all these things get left out. And luckily, again, there's the world, the Blu-ray and the DVD world for the extended versions and different releases. But sometimes it just hits the cutting room floor and it's gone. Like, I don't know if you knew Jeff Burr or not, or ever had Jeff on, passed away, a good friend and amazing director. And I'm forgetting which number of Leatherface movie that it was that I believe Dave Scow wrote it, and they intended to become just one of the bloodiest films ever made and shot it amazing. And then apparently it was too bloody and gory for exhibitors or the marketing people or something. And they just cut it right at the edge. And according to Jeff, what he had said before, that a lot of that footage is just gone because it was optical and they didn't save it. They just cut it. I mean, maybe they found some and there's been a re-release that I'm not aware of, but I remember talking about that with Jeff when he's still alive, and it was so frustrating for him as a filmmaker. And I'm sure for the writer and everyone involved, the effects people, and especially the fans. We want to see, you go, I love the fact that, Chainsaw 1 is the movie with hardly any blood, just a few drops, but we psychologically remember it. And it started those, for one of a better term, started the slasher genre and turned into so many bloody, gory things. But then to have that and finally just go full bore with it. And now I'm sure the effects these days, I mean, after Hostel and after so many other movies, the gore level is just like, we're so used to it in films now. But at the time it was being made, it was too much and gone. So, and that's just an effects thing, but also like story points, like you say,
Right.
like we were talking about earlier. Some of them are gone. Some of them don't exist anymore. And that's sad from an artistic, a preservationist, and a fan level, not to mention the creators and the people that really, really labor on stuff. And then poof, it's gone.
Right. And I believe that was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3.
I think it was 3. Yeah. That sounds right.
Which I just, again, a couple weekends ago, Horror Realm, big Pittsburgh horror convention I have covered for a long time. The people who run it are friends of mine, and I've been a long time fan before I was a podcaster. That went as just a normal attendee talking to people, and now I'm a press pass guy and I get in for free. And
Press. You're Peter Parker or
exactly
Clark Kent with you get your camera and your glasses.
Right.
Jump right in there.
And Caroline Williams was there, and I had a chance to interview her. Bill Moseley was also there. I didn't get to interview him, but
the icon.
Caroline was very nice. But, on the subject of Texas Chainsaw, 1, like you said, definitely should be considered the fundamental film. 2 has started the slasher genre, because you would not have Halloween if you didn't have Chainsaw first. That's a fact.
It's I think it's also a lesson to filmmakers too, that the less is more. And there's so many examples of that, from, we always talk about the shark not working in Jaws. And I think in Alien, the aliens were supposed to be on stilts and running, and that didn't work. So it becomes more, whatever variation that is, it's happened so many. I think that even happened maybe in Dog Soldiers 2. They couldn't move as well as they thought. But so many of that happy accident, but it's just basic filmmaking that goes back to, to Hitchcock level, to, when you tell the story and then you can add the stuff in. I think, I want to say it was, don't quote me on this, I think it was John Dykstra or one of the giant big time special effects guys from the 60s and 70s, that his mantra was, don't use me unless you need me. Somebody that's responsible for the most amazing things ever done, and telling the filmmaker, don't use me unless you need me. I mean, I'm sure you got paid either way, but that's the filmmaking. And then when you accent it and when you bring it into the fore, that's when it really becomes Titanic, because you're focusing on the filmmaking, and then the effects just blow it out of the water and make it so much better.
And that was part 2 for me, Texas Chainsaw. That part 2, from the way it starts out to introducing the real protagonist, Caroline Williams' character, Stretch, to Dennis Hopper, wanting revenge. It's like it's not just like your typical sequel. It's again resetting the horror trope of the final girl with introducing characters that you think are maybe you don't know yet or part of the plot line or not, killing them off right off the bat, and then having, the final girl being introduced, to take over. Then you have Dennis Hopper's character, who it's like a revenge movie, you know, for him, from characters from the first film. And then you have Chop Top, you have, Leatherface, more Leatherface, throwing in Chop Top as one of the most villainous, coolest, iconic horror characters ever in horror film history. And then to top it off with, the chainsaw battle between Hopper and Leatherface, like at the end. I mean, it in like a freaking abandoned, meat plant factory that's like, filled with, all these terrifying, nightmarish, corpses and bodies and skeletons and everything. And I remember the trailer was like 10 years for them to do a sequel to it, and it was just really because the 80s was, the hype of like slasher movies to bring it back. But I mean, to bring it back to that extent, I mean, they really upped the ante. And then the third one, this is my opinion, I consider it like the new nightmare of the franchise. Technically, it ends with part two. That's it. The family's dead. You know, Chop Top, maybe, they could, Hollywood, if you're listening, that's where I would suggest making an actual a Texas sequel, is
Great
bringing
spinoff. Yeah.
Chop Top back. But the third one, I honestly loved it. I think it's the one that, I mean, obviously the fourth one, Next Generation, gets a lot, probably has a lot more issues and gets a lot more heat and crap than the third one does. But the third one, I actually really, really enjoyed a lot. I think it's a standalone movie, and I could tell there was a lot that probably got cut from it. I remember seeing some behind the scenes stuff on the DVD when I had the DVD copy, that Viggo Mortensen had a lot more roles in that movie, well, scenes in that movie. There's a lot more other stuff going on, but I I honestly thought it was a really that one was really the true slasher film version,
Version
where
of it. Yeah.
the first two were really just like its own entity as a part one, part two, and this is like a brand new, just separate universe type film. And I remember also hearing there are a lot of issues with like the filming location. It was filmed in California and not Texas, but I personally enjoyed it a lot, and I
Yeah.
wish
Yeah.
we could have gotten
The full
the
version.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was
exactly. Well,
meant.
I'm hoping some of that stuff was saved out there to be a great testament to Jeff, who, as you know, passed on a while back, and
Right.
just a great guy, great one of the directors that I've been privileged enough to work with, but also became very, very good friends with, and such an amazing natural storyteller. And the guy could just make you, from all the horror movies and stuff, hardly anybody could make me laugh the way Jeff did. He just told such great stories, but that's what he could drill into the characters, and that's what the great, like we were talking about earlier, is the great directors do, the great scripts, the great actors, is they present a character and they drill down into that, and you make you care about them, and then you layer the monsters and the effects and stuff on top, and that's what makes it gold. So here's
Exactly.
wherever you're at, Jeff. Here's to you. Miss you,
Yeah,
and
here's
testament, great filmmaker, and all other departed friends. But your work stands pretty high in my opinion.
I would agree with that. Same with the late Stuart Gordon, as we're
Yep.
talking about with Lovecraft, Alien, Dan O'Bannon, another brilliant screenwriter and filmmaker. It's one of my major heroes and inspirations, and you know, Total Recall, Return of the Living Dead,
Yeah.
Alien, so much more. I think Screamers also was Dan O'Bannon, but yes,
And Swamp Shark, full circle. You
yeah,
got to put, when you're talking about all the greatest films ever made,
exactly,
you got to put
exactly,
Swamp Shark up
exactly,
there. So
exactly, exactly, and Ice Spiders. That's another one. Hey there, all my fishes in the sea. Thanks for tuning into today's episode and for being a subscriber. Your continued listenership and support means the most and helps keep the show growing to deeper and deeper depths. I want to let all my guppies in the sea know the Fisch Bowl has now officially partnered with FastCustomShirts.com, where they're now selling custom Fisch Bowl t-shirts under their podcast and website section. Every t-shirt that's purchased helps and goes a long way to keep the show growing to deeper and deeper and higher depths. I also now have custom hats, beanies, handbags, pens, mouse pads, everything to make you look like the coolest looking fish in the sea, which you can DM me directly on Instagram at thefishbowl88 or on Facebook at just the Fisch Bowl, or you can friend request me, Sam Fish, directly and get yours today. Your continued listenership and support again means the most. It's the most important fishes that flock together. We are a school of fish and we keep the unit going. Let's all keep swimming upstream.